Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming to our Joomla 3 ACL and maintenance webinar series this morning. My name's Rod Martin. I'll be your host. We just finished the Joomla 3 course this week, as you know. Hopefully, you've had a few minutes to look at some of the videos, and not a problem if you haven't. I'm going to talk briefly today about ACL and site maintenance, but I'm going to open it up mostly to your questions. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. Next week, why WordPress from a user perspective at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then today, again, as usual, if you wouldn't mind asking any questions that you've got, just go ahead and put them in the question box that's on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'd appreciate that. Everyone's muted for the session, so it doesn't get too confusing. So that's, again, next week, 11 a.m., Why WordPress? And then again, with the questions, if you wouldn't mind, just using the question box, and we'll see what we can do about answering your questions. We're scheduled for 30 minutes today, and we'll see how we do. Well, access control has three main layers or levels at the Joomla 2.5 and Joomla 3 level. The three levels for access control at the first part is public, registered, and special. You probably know all of this, but I'm going to just quickly go through it. Public's for anybody who lands on your website. Registered is for people with accounts, and special is for site administrators. Now, nice that in Joomla 2.5 and 3, we have absolute control over all of this. Access control number 2 is the group settings, and here's a pretty good chart that gives you an overview of what users can see and do. So at the public level, unregistered users can see content that has been assigned to the public level. They can't view registered content. People who are registered can view registered content. You'll notice the third column over the author column. They can obviously view public and registered content. They can also view special content. I'll talk a little bit later about why those three are important again. They can create new content and they can edit their own content. They can't edit anyone else's content, and they can't publish. So if you're looking for a workflow with Joomla, you might want to consider the author, editor, and publisher workflow, where each one has consistently increasing permissions to do things. So an editor can edit all content, but they can't publish. And then finally, a publisher can pretty much do anything that you need them to do with your content. All of that is a front-end group, and they do all of that on the front end. In the back end, then, managers and administrators and super administrators have different levels of access as well. Managers can basically manage the website from the back end, but they can't create users, install extensions, change the template, or change the site settings, which are in global configuration. Administrators have access to everything on your site except for changing the template and global configuration. And then finally, super administrators or super users in Joomla 3 have complete control over your site. One thing I always recommend in my classes is these two things. One, you shouldn't have too many super users. It's probably not a bad idea to have more than one, but you shouldn't have too many because they do have control over the entire site. And number two, honestly, your CEO doesn't need to be a super user. I know they probably want to, but honestly, they really probably shouldn't be unless they're uber geeks like you. So I always get a chuckle out of that in class because 9 times out of 10, the CEO of small companies especially wants to be that super user and have access to everything. In Joomla 3, again, we now have custom ACL, and this is absolutely fantastic. Something, of course, we didn't have in Joomla 1.5, and this was probably the biggest weakness in Joomla 1.5, other than the whole sections and categories thing. The fact that we could not have access control customized, now, boy, you can have it down to the individual article. You can customize your user levels, your user groups, your access levels, right down to the finest level you want. And so if you haven't looked at the ACL class in the Joomla 3 Intermediate class, I'm going to encourage you to do that. But here's the workflow that we go through. We first off create the user group. Then we decide on the permissions for that group, and we create a user and test. And I can't stress step 4 strongly enough. You need to test these things to make sure you get them right. Once you've got that group and those permissions, they are inherited from the groups above, and then you can customize them as you need. So that's site ACL. I'm going to flip over to a site in just a moment, but let me talk about site management, which was the other part of our course on Monday. You probably know all about Joomla versions, and this is a little bit up in the air right now, which is kind of interesting. So you'll find out that the major versions of Joomla, 1.5, and then 1.6 and 7, and then 2.5, and finally 3.5 that is hopefully coming soon. This may actually be changing, but we really don't know yet what it will be changing to. Right now, the 0.5 version, so 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5, are what's called the long-term release versions. These are the ones that will be supported for the long term. And as each 0.5 version is released, the previous version of Joomla goes into non-support mode. So technically right now, we are still at Joomla 2.5 in the long-term release, and so 1.5 is no longer supported by the community. Now, that doesn't mean that if a 1.5 site, if Joomla 1.5 suddenly gets some kind of major error, that it won't be patched. It will be patched. As we've seen, we're up to Joomla 1.5.26 right now. Joomla versions 1.6 and 1.7 were intermediate steps. And then after 2.5 came out, we went to a versioning control of minor versions 2.5.1, 2.5.2, etc., supposedly released every few weeks. We've seen that that's not quite accurate either. Generally speaking, minor versions have security and bug fixes, are not intended to introduce any major new features. Now, with Joomla 3, when Joomla 3 came out, we started to see a slight shift in this. Joomla 3.1, 3.2, and now 3.3, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. Each one of those versions is introducing some pretty major shifts, pretty major features. And at some point, will culminate with the 3.5 version. Nobody knows when that will be yet, but we're hoping, I'm certainly hoping, for sometime in the spring. It would be great to see that happen. But as I mentioned, that whole process of versioning might be changing a little bit. We'll have to wait to see to get the official report on that. Updating Joomla has never been easier, especially since 2.5 and 3 came out. You'll always get a big notice when you log into your site that Joomla has an update, and it's a simple thing of clicking the update button, and there you go. That's a beautiful new feature, really appreciated from the Joomla team, and it's pretty simple to keep your site up to date. Again, can't stress this enough. Keep your site up to date. I was in Chicago this past week with a group, and I mentioned this, and I had them all log into the back ends of their actual sites. And one particular site was at Joomla 2.5.2. Ouch. They are well behind, and they are quite open to being hacked at this point. So his first order of business when he got back yesterday was to get their IT guy together and get their Joomla site up to date. Updating Joomla is easy, and you will get emails if you subscribe at joomla.org to all of the update email type things. And again, the nice thing is your site will tell you as well these days. So keeping your Joomla site up to date. Now, one of the things, again, I always recommend before you press those buttons to update your site or update a component or an extension, make sure you take a backup. And the tool of choice there is, of course, Akiba backup, because you just never know. There might be a glitch, there might be a hiccup. So that's updating Joomla. Updating extensions is becoming as easy as well with the new extension updater. I might want to suggest not all extensions are using the updater yet, and so you'll need to make sure that you subscribe, my recommendation, subscribe to the email lists of all of the main extensions that you use. That way you'll know when they have an update as well. For security on your Joomla site, love admin tools. Admin Tools, the professional version, really locks down your site. You can do a lot of different things like two-factor authentication, which is now built into Joomla 3, but you can password protect your administrator area, change the ID of your administrator. You can change the prefixes of your tables in Joomla. With the professional version, you also get a PHP file scanner, which I have found to be very, very helpful, especially when I think a site might have been hacked. And it allows me to go ahead and run a security scan and see if there are any offending files. Of course, here's a Kiba backup. Kiba backup is just fantastic. Something, again, you can't afford to be without. The Pro version allows you to do a lot of different things, including sending your backups to other FTP servers, Amazon S3 servers, WebDAV servers, etc., and can't recommend it enough. Let me just flip quickly over to one of the test site. In fact, this is the test site from the Joomla Intermediate course. And in a Kiba backup, this is the free version. When you configure your website, you have the ability to say where the output directory is, what the log level is, what kind of backup it's going to be, whether it's a main database backup or a full site backup, and then what format you put it in, and some of the other quota managements here. That's really all you get with the free version. Can't recommend the paid version enough. Same thing with admin tools. Again, on this particular site, we just have the free version because we try to stick with free versions in our classes. But I'm talking to friends here, so I'm going to strongly suggest again that you look at the paid version. I think together they're 50 euros, which is not very much when you consider the power of what it gives to you. Just one last thing I want to talk about site maintenance, and then I'm going to open it up to questions on ACL and maintenance. Two sites I think are really helpful in your Joomla workflow. If you have more than one site, I'm really going to recommend watchful.li. Watchfully, as it's also known, is run by Vic Drover, who is on the OSM board, huge supporter of the Joomla community. And this is a fantastic system. Now, if you've only got one site, you don't need this. But if you have more than one site, I strongly recommend you look at it, because what it does is it sets up all of your updates and backups in one place. So it gives you one place to see everything about all of the sites you have, one place to do all your updates, one place to do your backups, malware scanner, extension updates that support the Joomla updater, server status, file modification. It's just fantastic. And it's not that expensive. You can get 5 sites for free, but for 25 sites, I think it's $20 or $19 a month. A really helpful thing if you're looking at supporting more than 1 or 2 or 3 Joomla sites. And that can be really, really helpful. From a security perspective, I want to recommend Securi, and I should have looked this up ahead of time. There it is. This is a security portal for a lot of different websites, but they support Joomla. If you sign up and have an account with them and you do get hacked, cleaning up your site is included in your subscription. And again, this is not that expensive. If you're supporting multiple sites, $16 a month for 2 to 5 websites, 6 to 10 is $25 a month. Now, again, the real benefit here is malware cleanup, blacklist removal, malware and blacklist monitoring, server-side file scanning, and website defacement monitoring. So if your site does get hacked, they'll tell you very quickly. And let's face it, Joomla sites sometimes get hacked, mostly because of out-of-date extensions or weak passwords. There was a blog, they put a blog out this week talking about the denial of service attacks on WordPress and Joomla sites, and they are increasing. Why? Well, they're the most popular CMSs in the world. And so people are trying to take down the sites just by hammering them with username and passwords. They start with admin. So please, if you're using admin as the username on your website, please change it. And they start with passwords like password. And believe it or not, I still come across people in our training that are using unbelievably insecure passwords. So make sure you're using a good, strong password, a username that's not admin. And if you're worried, these are two sites that will help you sleep at night. The Security Web Security site and Watchful.li. So let me stop there. It's about 11:15. Let me stop there and just say, what questions do you have about ACL or site maintenance today that we can help with? Feel free to put some questions down there in the question form, and we'll see what we can do about helping you out. Can the login module be cloaked so it is not found by robots? Chris, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, depending on how you want to do it. If you want to have any kind of login enabled on your site, uh, you can you can hide that. Sorry, if you want to have a login module on your site somewhere, it's hard to totally mask it. You could put it in a put it in an article using the load position, and then actually in your robots.txt file exclude that. That's not going to be totally perfect, but it's a big step in doing that. If you don't need people logging in at all, just unpublish it completely, and and then you can even just basically remove it from the front end completely as well. I think there's a couple of extensions that will help on that. And actually, what I can do is take a quick peek and look for you and hit you up with an email later on that. While I'm waiting for some other questions, again, let me just go over the ACL we covered in the intermediate class. As you recall, we set up a staff group here, and the staff group was for training. And so anytime you want to control what users see, you can set up a group, give that group permissions, and then add users to that group to test. So that's what we did here. We set up a user group called staff. Then under viewing access levels, we set up a staff viewing level that managers, administrators, staff, and super users all had access to, which means anybody who logs in just as a registered user, or even our authors, editors, and publishers, can't see this content. After that, we went to the article manager and the category manager, and we set up training category that was limited to only those users. And if you remember our cache workflow, categorize, add, and show, we then set up our main menu as well to say that the training menu let's see, where am I looking here? Sorry, guys, just a second. Details, where am I here? That's why it's hidden. The access was given to the staff user group. Sorry, I had a window over top of it. Not that you can see, but I couldn't see it. So we assigned that menu item to the staff menu, to the staff user group. And so when you logged in, even if you were a registered user, you didn't actually see that menu or that content. Then we added a staff. Then we added a staff training editor. And in the training editor, he was the group parent was staff. So this person inherits all of their permissions from the staff, which means they can access the staff content. And then we created their access to be able to edit the content from both of the from that particular user group. So that actually helped out a lot. Okay, so the question is, what's the easiest way to determine if extensions will be affected by a Joomla update? Oh, interesting. That's a great question. Your extensions should not be affected by a Joomla update, a minor Joomla update. So, Joomla 2.5.2 to 2.5.3, or, the levels we're up to today, your extensions should not be affected by that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take a backup before you actually make the decision to do the update. Uh, there should not be a cost. Oh, okay. So the cost for a major update. Going from Joomla 1.5 to 2.5 is actually a migration. And yes, there's usually a cost for that. It's unfortunately the migration from 1.5 to 2.5 is quite difficult depending on the site. You need to have extensions that the extensions need to have been updated from 1.5 to 2.5 that you're using, or you need to find new extensions as well. Your template can't be used in a 2.5 site that you used in 1.5. And when you're going from 2.5 to 3, it's a lot easier. One of the things I'm seeing is template makers are making their templates compatible to both 2.5 and 3. So there shouldn't be a problem there if you're using one that does that. Also, most extensions now have been updated to version 3, but again, you need to make sure that your extensions are Joomla 3 compatible. What I'm finding in my workflow is that going from 1.5 to 2.5 is a headache. One of the tricks I've decided that I like best is, instead of actually using the migration tool like SP upgrade or J upgrade now, I'm actually just building the sites from scratch. And so even on a website with a few thousand articles, I'm building it from scratch because I can use an extension called J2XML. And I encourage you to just search for that on the extension directory, and it will import articles, users, images, pretty much anything you need, categories as well. So what I'm encouraging the people whose sites I'm working with, um, make sure that you're getting your content where you want it to be, and then using J2XML to do the update. And that's actually taking a lot less time than some of the other solutions. You're on Joomla 2.5.19. Let's just take a quick peek. Joomla.org. And this is basically the easiest way to find this out, Lisa. Go to Joomla.org, click the download link, and anytime. So you're actually on the latest version of Joomla 2.5, and that's absolutely fine. The point 0.5 version is the long-term release, and you are bang on, no problems there. So for instance, when an update comes out to 2.5.20, that's again the kind of updates you want to do. Right now, Joomla 3 is still what's technically in the short-term release, so there's really no need to upgrade to Joomla 3 yet, unless you really need those features that have been added, like tagging and some other things. And when you do need to go to Joomla 3, it will be a far easier process than going from 1.5 in my experience. So I think that will be really helpful and so much easier than it's been from 1.5 to 2.5. Any other questions today, folks? These have been great. Chris, is there a way for super user to find passwords in the database? Encryption keeps all passwords secure, correct? Absolutely. The passwords can never be looked up. You can create new ones. You can override them using phpMyAdmin inside your control panel. You can even create completely new super users in your control panel. There's a script at joomla.org. You can just go ahead and Google for that. But of course, to do that, you still have to have control panel access, phpMyAdmin access to do it. You technically can reset the password using phpMyAdmin and giving it an MD5 encryption. They're going to be doing away with that, I think, but it's pretty tough to do. You certainly can't look up passwords. There's no way to do that. That's why you'll find on a Joomla website most often it actually resets somebody's password. It doesn't look them up. You can't even resend a user's password to them from Joomla, even if they like from something like Community Builder or something. So passwords are pretty secure in Joomla. Chris, did that answer your question well enough? Yes, it did. Well done. Any other questions today, folks? Well, let me just reiterate one last thing. If you have a website where you have more editors than just, one or two, or if you need a website that limits access to content based on user groups, the ACL part of Joomla is something you really want to dive into. In the intermediate class, I give links to a couple of websites over at joomla.org that go into some more detail on it as well. The book Joomla Explained has a couple of really great chapters on this as well. So this is not something you want to just ignore and give everybody access to, say, even a manager or administrator level just because they have to edit some articles on your site. The nice thing with Joomla, you can actually limit their access to even just one article. If you have a summer intern who's updating your content, just one area, say, for instance, on the screen, the staff training area, or one article or one groupings of articles, the ACL Manager is something that's really great. There is an extension that I want to highlight. Um, it's not a free extension, and for the life of me, I can never remember it. It's ACL Manager. This is a great extension from a group that does security and site access. Uh, it's ACL Manager. It basically just gives you one grid where you can click, 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 and give everybody the permissions they need. And a lot of people have found this to be really helpful. I've heard some great feedback on it. So again, it's not free, but you can check that out at their website. Well, folks, thanks so much for coming today. Just again, 11 a.m. Eastern next week. Why WordPress from a from a user perspective? I'm assuming none of you will come out for that, but let your friends know. And just want to say thank you so much for coming today. Again, my name is Rod Martin. My Twitter handle is I'm Rod Martin. That ends the webinar for today. Thanks so much for coming, and have a great day.